life and society in Japan to subscribe to the alt rule.
I think that there's plenty of money in education. There's a lot of money in education. There could be more, sure, but I think that the money that you throw at the problem isn't going to fix the problem. I was actually at an event last weekend. They had some foreigners come to a Girl Scout event and talk about sustainable education. And I was like, well, one, what's the difference between the Japanese education system and the American education system? And I was talking with one of the Girl Scout older lady leaders. Japan takes a lot of pride in how equal their education system is throughout the entire country. In America, private schools, I think the reason why a lot of private schools do well is because one, they're in good areas, and two, the community is involved. Private schools, you pay thousands of dollars spending this money on your child. That means you're invested in your child. A full community of parents that are involved in their child's learning, I think that breeds a healthy environment. In Japan, there's a lot of random teacher days, teacher parent days.
Do you not have those in Americans?
We do, but I feel like they're not as often. They're at the beginning of the year. They're one time in the year, and they're after, they're like 6 p.m. or something like that, after most parents get home from school.
Right.
These, I've seen like multiple days where the students, for example, there was a Sanensei third grader, students working on a speech for English. A whole bunch of parents just came to the school to watch all the students give their speech, and then they posted their speeches on the wall. It seems like the parents are more involved in these kinds of communities than your average public school community in America. And maybe that's just a living situation. Maybe that's parents both working jobs, or maybe even a single parent working 2 jobs and not having the time necessarily to be a part of that school community.
I think it is interesting to see how much the parents here, the ones that do have kids, value their kids. And especially here in Miyazaki, where there's so many families, it's very interesting to see that as opposed to something that you might see in other parts of Japan. While we haven't necessarily seen other parts of Japan in terms of the middle schools or junior high schools, from what I've heard is that the parents and the child, there is distance between them in Japanese culture. There's a lot more people who fall out of the school system and the education system and go into the workforce earlier, at an earlier age.
So would you say that there's a correlation between the students that kind of drop out early and go more towards the finish middle school, go straight to work, and the students that go to college with kind of a family involvement? Do you think there's a correlation between that?
I feel like that the families that put a lot of emphasis on education and the families that I guess are kind of there in the child's education and very active and very involved, definitely leads to a higher chance that the student also takes that perception of education and the education system and feels that they should follow through onto a university and even PhD or master's degree programs.
Right, the support is there. I think that's the difference. I think oftentimes in America people will talk about the education system and there needs to be more money in the system. I think that there's plenty of money in education. There's a lot of money in education. There could be more, sure, but I think that the money that you throw at the problem isn't going to fix the problem. I think we need to focus on families and parents being a part and being active in their child's learning journey, and I think that's the difference. The family and parental involvement and activity inside the child's life, that's the difference between private school and public schools, and especially public schools in worse areas. I was talking with some of the ladies at the event last weekend, and they said there's not very many private schools in general. Most schools in Japan are public schools.
Interesting.
And once again, they take pride in the fact that all the public schools are of the same level, apparently.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're all taught the same things. They all have the same curriculums anywhere you go in Japan. There's no California state standards, Texas state standards, type of situation here in Japan. So you're not going to have Miyazaki state standards. They're all the same.
Some schools are not common in the United States.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever heard of any people, I've heard of people studying on their own, during summer break. But here, during summer break, a lot of students will just they'll go straight to a cram school.
Yeah,
and be studying through that summer vacation. It's like their only vacation.
The culture is definitely, if there is any culture shock to me, some people have crazy experiences with culture shock living in another country. I don't really have those. Just in my life. But if I were to say there was a culture shock to me, one of the biggest ones is how I'll ask students how was your weekend on Monday. They're like, oh, I studied. Study? What? and they study so much. But then sometimes I'm like, are you really studying? Because let's not be studying English.
They're not studying English.
You know, I don't know.
Life and society in Japan, to subscribe to the alt room.